doctor is in the house. Liz Sweigart. Girl, I'm so happy to have you here.
I am thrilled. I'm so excited to have the chance to chat with you and just let's create some great energy.
Yeah. I want to ask you one of the words that has been coming up for me as of late, and I always believe there's these beautiful little serendipitous moments if you can lean into them, rise up off the pings and dings. And it's been around realizing life's beautiful little coincidences. And I thought of you this morning because I thought about how we were introduced through a dear friend. Shout out Kim Napolitano for making the connection. Good humans know good humans. And I would love to hear from you. What does life's little coincidences mean to you? And how do you lean into that? Do you have any sort of serendipitous moments or rituals where you're like, oh God, I can see that full circle moment and what a gift that is?
Wow, you are speaking to my soul.
Mm.
It's so funny. I've been at a conference this week in Lansdowne, Virginia, and as I was walking into it on Tuesday, the start of the conference, I had one of these pinch me moments
Mm.
because I realized that I was surrounded by the people who are the smartest, most passionate, most engaged in their industry, in their area of expertise, that they were here because they wanted to share their knowledge and they
Mm.
wanted to make the world better. And I thought, how did I get here? How did I
Mm.
get into this space? Because on paper, and so often, what is on paper or these days on LinkedIn is what seems to define the worth and value that we have and we can bring to the world that is looking at us from an extractive and exploitative fashion.
Mhm.
And what I realized walking into this space and seeing my dear friend who had invited me was that it was like looking at a constellation of stars.
Mm.
And when you see a single pinprick of light, you don't necessarily envision the whole picture. And
Mm.
so when I saw my friend who had arranged for me to attend, and then I thought, well, how did we meet? Well, we met because I was invited to another event by someone who I met through a serendipitous connection,
Mm.
who I met that person because someone else said, you should really talk to this
Mm.
other person who I think you would really resonate with. You're talking about things that I just heard from him. Y'all should have a chat.
Mm.
And what I realized is that I have been putting out these connections. I have been
Mm.
weaving this web my whole life.
Mm.
And when I look at this incredible firmament of people that I have had the chance to know, to learn from, to learn with, to to share life with,
Mm.
I realized that had I tried to plan everything out, I would be so miserable. But
Mm.
that putting instead my energy into creating a space where I can show up as my authentic self
Mm.
and then holding space for others to be their authentic selves,
Mhm.
that's where we can foster genuine connection. And when we
Mm.
make genuine connections with ourselves, with each other, that's when that's when the magic happens. That's
Mm.
when we curate these incredible constellations of people that frankly bring about amazing projects. So when I think about how did I get here from a career that really started entirely because I woke up 3 weeks before college graduation and said, I don't want to go to law school.
Mm.
When I think about that moment to where I am now, there's no plan, there's no rule book. What there is the intent to put good energy into the world, to act first out of service to others,
Mm.
and a belief that if you give people time, they will reveal to you delight and surprise, and you will find ways of connecting with them and then connecting them with others.
Mm.
So serendipity is probably my life's word, because nothing in my life has come about because it was exquisitely planned. And yet, I would describe my life as exquisite.
Oh, I love that. As you're talking, my friend, it makes me flash too. Have you read Shonda Rhimes' book, Year of Yes?
It's so funny. I have not read it. I've heard so much about it, and the whole premise resonates with me. The idea of just embracing life and taking risk, opening your heart, and freeing your mind,
Yes.
and rejecting the artificial binaries. So I have not read it. I've read snippets, but I haven't sat down and read it. It is on my list. Like, my list is ridiculous, but
Oh my
yes,
God, I
the
know.
ethos
Another
of
thing to
it,
list.
I love.
So, to our beautiful listener, if you are intrigued by this, check out her book. I believe you could also do it on Kindle or Audible, but it's all around everything you said, Liz, saying yes to these beautiful little serendipitous moments. Someone says, I have someone for you to meet. Instead of thinking, yeah, I'll get to it, say yes to the introduction, reach out, put yourself in the rooms because this ripple impact is just, like you said, exquisite, exquisite. And what I want to ask you, my friend, as you were just talking about having this moment of being in this room this week and looking around and thinking, wait, what am I doing here? How did you not let that go down this dirty path of imposter syndrome? Because I've had that where I've looked in rooms and thought, what am I doing here? And then started to think to myself, well, do I have anything to contribute to this room? Like, am I good enough to be here? And I feel like that could be a slippery slope. So what do you think it was that didn't have you go down that path?
So I think it's important to acknowledge that many of us, and it is so often attributed to women,
Mm-hmm.
and in particular, I've heard the sentiment of imposter syndrome, again, largely from women, oftentimes women of color, people of color.
Mm-hmm.
um, and a lot of it is how we have been socialized
Mm-hmm.
to understand, and well, to have an understanding of what is our worth and what is our value. And it comes across in very capitalistic, exploitative, and extractive terms. um, and I will, I mean, I freely talk about, I feel that I do. Where does it not become just the death spiral of negative self-talk
Yes.
for me is that I have, and part of this may also be because of my academic background and research, is I've learned to look for evidence. I mean, honestly, it comes out of everything I've done. You can't be a tax person and not focus on the facts. When I think about those times where I'm asking myself, what am I doing here?
Mm.
So, for example, this conference was all about exploring central bank digital currency. If you look at my resume, that would not be the first thing you would think I would attend.
Mm-hmm.
And so walking in, I'm like, well, what do I have to contribute? And the answer was a whole lot.
Mm.
Why? What about me, and how do I turn off that track? Well, the what does the evidence tell me? The evidence tells me that I'm really good at listening. The
Mm.
evidence tells me that I've seen myself, as a systems thinker. I'm
Mm.
really good at analogizing from one area to a completely disparate area and drawing connections between them. Again, analogizing, being able to say, well, what you've just described to me sounds like this thing I've seen over here.
Mm.
Technically, there are some differences, but when I think about it in terms of a process, we're looking at something that's very similar. Have you thought about this? So I think of the skills that I bring, that I've seen myself demonstrate, my ability to ask questions that empower and unlock potential in others, helping to reframe, helping to think about things differently. I think about all of the experience that I've had working with everything from like the Fortune 10 to,
Mm-hmm.
mom and pop businesses in the swamps of Louisiana. I think about all of the experiences I've had working around the world. I think about my training in psychology. I think about my training, frankly, in history, and walking into these spaces and being able to say, I have evidence that I can point to of skills that I have, that I've used, that have created aha moments, that have
Mm.
brought insight, that have generated new ideas, new opportunities, in some cases, even created new businesses. I I know I have that, but more importantly, I know that I come with a growth mindset,
Mhm.
and I know that I come with incredible curiosity, because what will make me stand out in a room is not that I am the most interesting person. Because for me to be the most interesting person in the room requires me to make it all about me in such a way that is
Mm.
inauthentic to who I am. But man, am I curious about other people. I love other people. I love their stories. I love the things they nerd out about. If you're passionate about something and I know nothing about it, or I don't even think it's that interesting, but you care a lot, then I want to know all about it. Because if somebody that I think is interesting has something that they care a lot about, I want to know, because they're on fire about it. So I
Mm.
know that that's what I walk into spaces with. I have evidence of that I can point to and say, I did this stuff. And by reminding myself that this is how it's been, it can be this way again. Now, as somebody who did grow up in the 80s, when the Franklin Mint had all of those commercials on TV with the little like decorative plates, and at the end they would always say past performance is no indication of future results. It's true. Just because something happened in the past doesn't mean it will happen again. And I do have evidence that I've done hard things in the past, I've done
Mm.
challenging things, and that tells me that if I've done those things, I have what I need within me to do other things that are hard and challenging. And that's how I walk into those spaces.
God, I love that. Like you're being your own hype woman. You know how your friends can see things in you and you like, oh my God, yeah, you're right. I never even realized that. Being your own hype
Mhm.
woman. I love that. I absolutely love that. And as you were talking, Liz, about when you're able to reframe the narrative of it not being about you. My girlfriend had written this children's book, and Susan Ross, she's been on the podcast, and she'd said to me, Meg, the reason that I was able to put this book out into the world is because it was for my son. It wasn't for me. And I thought to myself, I didn't truly understand that until, almost, gosh, I would say earlier this year. So I've been in this business 2 years. And I said to her, Susan, I now get it, because it is no longer about me, Megan Miller. It's about teaching you, Liz, having this open conversation to say, what are you struggling with? Because I've been there. Here's what I've learned, to make it more about how I can use my struggles to help you. And there's something freeing in that.
There's something intensely freeing in being vulnerable.
Yeah.
I was having this conversation with someone who is so incredibly dear to me about how, um, in terms of our relationship, our knowing each other, um, we had never really been vulnerable with one another.
Mm.
There was always this sort of holding back of, I am still concerned with how you're
Mm.
going to think about me. And if I say this out loud, then I have to admit it to myself. And I may not be ready for that yet.
Mhm.
And when and it's amazing. Sometimes you grow compatibly with other people. Sometimes, I mean, there are times that you grow apart. There are times that you'll grow in parallel, but it's often rare that people will grow together, will grow into one another.
Mm.
And to have that moment where we both realized, this sort of pretending for ourselves
Mm.
isn't working. we
Mm.
need to be we need to be vulnerable. Like, I need to be honest with myself first and foremost. And frankly, in leadership, the single least understood, least studied, and least appreciated form of leadership is leadership of self. You cannot lead other people until you can lead yourself, until you're self aware, you're situationally aware, and you can self regulate all of the components of emotional intelligence. Until you can do that, not really useful to other people. And in friendship, in any form of relationship, um, having that ability to make yourself vulnerable and hold that space for yourself first and then offer it to somebody else, that's pretty incredible.
So, my friend, I'd love to hear from you. And I love how you said, you're taking me to church right now. I love when you said vulnerability. Man, you got to do it with you first. And that man, oh, that is mucky. That's Murray. I heard Viola Davis say, and I love this. She said, I would rather go toe to toe with Mike Tyson in a ring than have to realize these conversations I've had about myself and with myself and be vulnerable. And I'm like, oh, I feel that. It's uncomfortable. So for a
Mm-hmm.
listener that wants to create this connection, this true connection, this putting down that damn mask, this being real, this connection to themselves first, this connection with others in their life, where do they start? Any recommendations on how they can begin the process?
So first and foremost, I would put in a plug for getting a great therapist.
Mm, mm,
Um, uh, and that's not glib at all. I would also say that when we start thinking about how can we become more of our true authentic selves, how can we get real with ourselves? One of the first exercises that we can do is to raise our self-awareness, to increase our mindfulness. And yeah, you can do this by trying out guided meditations, whether it's your Peloton app or
mm,
it's
mm,
something you find on YouTube. Um, but starting with small and simple exercises that put you in touch with what's happening in your brain,
mm,
because there are a lot of things that happen in our lives that lead us to not want to spend time with our own thoughts. And there is a lot of self medication that happens to avoid having to sit with our thoughts and our feelings. And, a glass of wine is not self care.
mm,
Listening, really sitting with and being in a place where you listen to what's happening within you and you understand what's happening within you, that is a form of caring for yourself. So I would say that when people want to start, what can you do? The simplest and exercise is to begin with mindfulness, an exercise where you become aware in the moment of what you're feeling.
mm,
So right now, I can tell you I'm excited. I'm engaged. I feel energized. I feel loved. I feel
mm,
appreciated by you.
mm,
Um, I feel joy.
mm,
I also feel some nervousness. Will I say the right thing? So that's happening too. I also have a part of my brain in the very back that's going, well, the weather where I'm flying to today is supposed to be terrible when I land. Is my flight going to be delayed? Am I going to get there on time? All of these things are happening within me. And as part of that, I'm also thinking, am I going to disappoint my children? I want to
mm,
get home and hug my babies. All of these things are happening. And by being aware of what am I feeling right now? What's bringing up these feelings? So I'm feeling guilty. Wait, where's that feeling coming from? Oh, trace that on back. And it's like, oh, that's the plane. That's my nervousness about that. And then being able to say to myself, you know what, girl? It's going to be what's going to be.
mm.
You do not have control over the weather, despite the fact that when she was 2, your younger daughter told you that she didn't want you to pull her hair back. She wanted you to make the wind stop. I love that she believed that I had that level of power over Mother Nature. She was like, Mother Nature all under the same, I'm sure y'all have the same reporting structure. No, sorry, sweetheart. If you don't want your hair in your face, your choice is pull it back or deal with it. But mommy can't make the wind stop. So despite that, I can't control the weather. And so part of this for me is in this moment saying, I'm feeling a lot of things. I recognize what some of them are and how they're distracting me from where I want to be, and that I have a choice.
Mm.
I can say I'm gonna focus on Meg, and I'm going to set aside these other feelings. They're real, they're valid, they are what I perceive, therefore they are my reality. And I also know that it's not a crisis.
Mm.
I know that there will be a time that I can handle that, I can deal with it. But right now, I know what I'm feeling, I know why I'm feeling it, and I am able to make a choice about what I want to do with those feelings.
Mm.
And it's wrapped up in the other piece of it, which is my awareness of what's happening around me, what's happening with you, and thinking about from your perspective, well, what else are you feeling? Because my guess is you have a bunch of other things on your mind beyond our conversation. And you're also saying, right now, I'm being here. And
Mm.
so that's one of the most powerful things that we can do in our own journeys of leading ourselves, our own journeys of becoming our best selves. And that's to begin with, what am I feeling? And just naming it. And
Mm.
doing that in the moment is incredibly hard. So often after the fact, it's like, oh man, I was really mad back then. Now I understand why it was that I blew up at the wait staff, or I had a meltdown at baggage claim, or whatever it is. But getting that awareness in the moment and then using that to give yourself choices in how you behave, that's really where the magic of leading yourself comes from. So yeah, start with, what am I feeling, why am I feeling this way, and what are my choices about what I want to do with it.
Oh, I love that. You know, as you're talking, it made me flash to my own journey. You know, one of the hardest things I think that we are ever tasked to answer is what do you want? Because I don't think we're ever really taught to lean into that and unpack it and ask ourselves. And I will tell you, I learned myself. This wasn't until really 36, 37 did I get to really know who I was after my own meltdown, breakdown, emotional breakdown by turning the pen to paper. Everything you just said, I am creating a moment of silence to hear myself, to just free write. Didn't even need to make sense. Didn't even reread it. And I feel that so many people think that you need to be a writer or like writing. And I always say pen to paper, it allowed me to find out who I was. So do you, my friend, have any rituals or any practices that you do to hear yourself, to create that space for you so you don't lose yourself in all the things?
Ooh. So pen to paper first, yes.
Mhm.
Journaling's incredibly powerful. And then there are some of us who, like, I have so many notebooks that from the 1st of January to about the 8th of February, like heart and soul poured onto the page, and then we've got nothing for the
Nothing.
next 10 months. Nada. Um, and the thing is that, we'll talk about, like, we talk about journaling when you sit back and you think of it as a process.
Mm.
And it's the process of taking the information that is within us and putting it into a form where it's more reflective for us. There was a wonderful TV show, in the late 90s, very early 2000s, called Felicity. I'm totally dating myself now.
Oh, I remember Felicity,
And
and I loved her hair.
oh,
Man, she had
oh,
a head of hair.
oh, oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, so we could talk Felicity. We could have a whole podcast on Felicity. She had this ritual where she talked into a tape recorder, and then she would send the tapes off. And I did that. Yes, and I did that with my sister, sporadically for years. What I found is that journaling for me takes different forms now.
Mm.
Um, And so there are times that I will record a video of me talking, and I will send it to a friend of mine who, it's one way that we communicate back and forth. There are times that I literally just record myself kind of just talking, because that's one of the way I'm a verbal processor,
Yeah.
obvious. Yeah, I know. Not a surprise to anyone. Um, and that's one of the ways that I found to do it. For a long time it was my blog, which is another form of journaling. When I was going through intense therapy and recovery from a major depressive episode that, it sidelined me from life for about a year. The
Mm,
recovery process, the actual
hmm.
depression itself, was that depressive episode lasted, gosh, 2 plus years.
Hmm.
And that was the one that culminated in me becoming suicidal.
Hmm.
Um, Blogging was the journaling process that I worked through in my recovery. What I have found now is that uh, the blog is not the tool I need right now.
Hmm.
Now the tool has become sharing, like whether it's I write notes to friends, whether it's I record those videos or those audio snippets. I have different ways now of capturing my own data, literally, and putting it into a place for me to kind of analyze it. And I know, again, like this, that's the researcher in me coming out, but I think we all find ways of capturing our expression, and for some it's through art.
Mm,
um, for different times in my life, I recognize now that it was through knitting. I
mm.
love to, like, I'm literally like some sort, like I'm like a 70-year-old British woman. um, but I've realized that, like, there are ways that we find to get this out of us
Mm.
and put it into a form where we can reflect on it better. And sometimes it's iterative. And one of the things that I have noticed is that there are folks who will be told, journal. And the first thing, so they go out and they get a pretty notebook and they get a
Yeah.
pen, and they're like, yeah, I can't do this. I don't have the discipline for this. And it's like, right, because it's not a ritual for you. It's not part of your habits. You can make it a habit, but it still may not be the one that's authentic to you right now where you are. So it's iterative, and you keep working until you find a way to get what's in you out, such that you can hold it up to yourself like a mirror.
God, I love that. And thank you for the permission slip to all of us to say, one, it's not always going to look the same. It's okay to ebb and flow with the season of your life. And two, you don't have to do the thing that everybody on Instagram is saying, buy the journal, do the thing, da, da, da. There's power and curiosity of what works for you, and it's not going to look the same for everyone. I love that. Thank you for that. I feel we need more conversation
Absolutely.
on that because I just feel like in our digital world, man, where people are hammering shit on you, you think to yourself, I need a morning ritual. I need to work out for da da da. I need to do this. And if I don't, then I suck, then I fail, then it's not working. So you go back to old habits because at least it's what you know. And I just feel that your permission slip to just get curious and just feel what feels right. And it's not always going to look the same. There's no right or wrong. It's such a beautiful gift.
Oh my gosh, thank you. And yes, 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 because as you go through life, it's going to change. Like,
Hmm.
that's the thing that's the other part of it is, we can build up all the rituals and the habits we want, and then life happens.
Mm.
Like, for example, I had a couple of kids. I have no idea what I did with all of my time before I had children. I literally, I'm like, I really should have taken over the world by now, given how much free time I clearly had before they were born. What did I do with myself? It's the thing about life is that we have these myths that, like, humans are inherently resistant to change. It's like, no, we're not. All we do from the time we're born is change. If we were resistant
Yeah.
to change, we'd all still be crawling. And we're not, right? We None of us would be eating solid food. No, we're not resistant to change. In fact, if you ask my 11-year-old, she can't wait to change and be taller than her mom and take my shoes. And we we are changing all the time. What we are often challenged with is giving ourselves the grace to
Mm,
change awkwardly. And change is rarely seamless, and it's rarely graceful. And so we
mm,
need to give ourselves a big old measure of grace and say, there was a time in my life where I blogged. Uh, I brought I It was my ritual. And when I let go of that, because it was no longer serving me the way that it was, I had to deal with a lot of feelings of guilt and
mm,
failure. Because
mhm,
because that's the thing is, right? Like, we live in a world of brands. Oh, well, that was part of my brand. That's like, okay, well, it was. And that's not where I am right now. That's not where I need to be right now. And giving myself permission, because I say this frequently. The only thing around here that ever gets validated is parking. That's it. We affirm ourselves and we affirm others, because when we seek validation, it's the stamp that says you're okay. I know, don't need that. I've made my choice, and what I need is encouragement and support in being me.
mm,
Now, are some of my life choices poor? Survey says yes,
mhm,
and they're still my choices.
mhm,
And I need to figure out what it is that I'm going to do with those. And when I recognize something isn't working for me, then I need to empower myself and feel empowered to change it.
mhm.
And change is good. Change is inevitable. When something stops working for us, even if we think, but that's what I'm known on Instagram for, um, we can let go of it, and we can find be curious, exactly as you said before. We can be curious about and iterate on what we're doing until we find the thing that is feeding us, is supporting us, and being who we want to be right now.
Mm. I love how well there's two things I want to talk about. And first, let me go to this. I love how you brought up and thank you for bringing up the 2 year plus battle with depression, these suicidal thoughts. I don't think I've ever shared this with anyone. I myself had a point in my life where I struggled with suicidal thoughts deeply. And I did it alone because I was too fearful to let anyone in. And I think we feel our darkest days will last forever. It is hard to see the light on the other end of that tunnel when you are in
Mhm.
it and it feels deep and it feels dark and it feels like you're alone. So, for any of our beautiful listeners and community and tribe that might be in that tunnel that you were in, that I was in, what is your advice to get through the day and know that there is the light on the other end? It is there. What would your advice be to them?
My first, can I just say thank you?
Mm,
Thank you for sharing that and your vulnerability, and thank you for trusting me and for trusting everyone who's listening with that. Um, your authenticity is a gift,
oh my God, this is getting me
and
emotional. You're
I
bringing me to
am
tears.
I am so grateful you're here,
Ditto,
and I'm really
ditto,
proud of you,
ditto.
because that is hard.
Mm,
And you're not only are you here, but you're not surviving, you're thriving.
mm,
You did it.
mm.
I
And you
hope you
too.
are incredibly proud of yourself, because I'm really proud for you.
Mm,
And I'm
thank you.
really glad you're here.
Thank you.
I'm really
Here's to
glad you're
turning our
here.
mess into our message, right? There is something powerful in that. There is something powerful.
There is, and I have a lot of mess.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so it's and I appreciate the question. I will absolutely renew my call to everyone to get themselves a great therapist. And if you're not happy with who you're working with, find somebody. Keep looking until you find somebody that you can work with. Because having that space with someone who is able to hold up the mirror and help you to look into it, where you don't necessarily like what you see in that mirror, and yet you don't look away. You're able to engage, with what is in the mirror, that's very powerful. And you don't need a therapist. You don't. Therapists are not just for when everything is terrible. Therapists are great when things are good too.
Mm-hmm.
Therapists are
Mm-hmm.
just great, period. So I always put in a plug for therapy. Um, Let me thinking back to the really dark days, and something it's fascinating to me still how um I I know, like, intellectually, I know where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I recall, like, there are pieces. I was very heavily medicated um at the point that I had become suicidal. And I there is a lot from that time between really about April, May, um, of 2019 until actually this time. It was Thanksgiving. It was right around Thanksgiving 2019. Um, there is about a 4 or 6 month period where I I really I couldn't tell you. I I have so little memory of that time. And in some ways I'm grateful for that, because it
Mm-hmm.
was it was the lowest point of my life. Um, I know intellectually where I was, but I find that I cannot access those feelings right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also grateful for that, because I think it's my brain in some ways protecting me. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to, that isn't, those are not feelings I want to recreate. And yet they are accessible to me in the sense that I know where I was,
Mm-hmm.
but I cannot recreate the feeling for myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's like looking at a picture. It's like looking at a photograph from an old film camera that was fuzzy, like out of focus. And it's like you can sort of make out who and what is in the picture, but it doesn't look like a real place. Like you sort of have this fuzzy recollection of it, but you can't crystallize it in your mind. And so when I think about where that was, and what that was like, and trying to hold on to hope, um, I would say that first, one of the things that has continuously helped me in living with depression. I mean, I live with depression. I am not in an active depressive episode right now. I haven't been in, gosh, cool 3 years or more. I've had some difficult days, but we kind of all have.
Yeah.
Um, but I have not had a slide, and I continue to be optimistic, and I continue to be hopeful and determined that I have tools now I didn't have before,
Mm.
that I don't have to go back to that place.
Yeah.
I have no belief that I will get through the rest of my life without having days where I feel the symptoms of depression. I know I know that that is a thing, that is real. And I also believe that the major depressive episode that gripped me is not it's not a shadow over my shoulder chasing me down. I am
Mm.
not running from it. I know that it is possible, but I do not believe it is probable. So when I think about how to kind of hang on to hope in those very difficult times, one of the most powerful skills that I've cultivated in my recovery, um, from being suicidal, is just this ability to open up my growth mindset, to
Mm.
activate that part of my brain that says how things are now is not how they will be forever.
Mm.
I have learned to appreciate paradox in a way I didn't before. And the best analogy I have for it, is like being on an airplane that's parked at the gate and you're about to take off, and it's noon, but it feels like it's nighttime because the clouds are gray, it's dark, it's pouring down rain, and everything feels like gloom and doom. And you're thinking, there is no possible way we could take off in this weather. Everything is just gray, rainy, and awful. And yet the plane taxis to the runway and it takes off.
Mm.
And about 3 to 5,000 feet up, all of a sudden you burst through the clouds and the light is blinding. The sun, this bluebird sky and this pure sunlight bouncing off the wings and the water droplets. And it's just the brightest light you've ever seen. And you realize, wait a second, at the same two, dimensional coordinates, it is both pouring down rain and bright sunshine.
Mm.
And that is true. The only difference is your altitude. The only difference is your perspective. Because in that, at those two coordinates at that time, both things are true. It is raining and the sun is shining.
Mm. That's
And
beautiful.
in our lives, two things are true at the same time. Yes, we can be in a state of profound depression. We can be in a state in which our brains are lying to us, because that's what depression does. Depression lies. It's awful. It is insidious. Depression is telling us lies. It is making us believe stories about ourselves that are not true, but that we perceive are real. And around us, the sun is shining. And
Mm.
it's the ability to help yourself to recognize that it is the perspective you are in at that time. You are parked at the gate and it is pouring down rain, and yet 5,000 feet above you it is sunshine. And the question becomes, how do I get help getting off the tarmac? And
Mm.
that's the key, is how do I change my elevation? And when you try to go it on your own, you try to get it out of it all on your own, not going to get anywhere. If you're going to break out of it, you need help. And what I would say to anyone who feels that they are surrounded by the storm clouds and they are just getting soaked in the rain is to reach out, however clumsily you do it,
Mm.
however imperfectly it feels, however hard it is to find and speak those words, because without a doubt, you are surrounded by sunshine. You are
Oh, yeah.
surrounded by people who love you. You are loved. You matter. And people want the chance to help. They just so frequently have no idea how. People don't do the best they can.
Mm.
People do the best they know how.
Mm.
And
Mm.
often when they learn better, they do better. But the
Mm.
gap so often between the best we can do and the best we know how is a chasm. And so oftentimes the people around you are doing the best they know how, and you're doing the best you know how. And you may not feel that you have the words and it may feel clumsy, but when you give people a chance, giving them a chance to help you is giving them a gift, because
Mm.
they love you and they want you to be there.
Mm.
And they may not know the extent of the hurt, and they may feel powerless. They may feel like they don't know what to do. They don't even know where to start. Open it up, give them the chance. And when you do, people delight and surprise you.
Mm.
But that's the thing is, though, I have no judgment for the steps people take when they are in that place of darkness, because I know that struggle. So there is no judgment in what people in the choices people make,
Mm.
because it is horrible.
Yeah.
And there is also hope, and there is help, um, and there is not just the potential to get better, but there's the probability that things will get better. But believing you're not alone and being able to take that first step to say, I am hurting.
Mm.
Um, that's that is the first step, but you are not alone, and things can and likely will get better.
I can understand, my sister, why you are a teacher, because that analogy, that visual representation, I will never forget that. And I know our listeners won't either. Like, I will always remember on my dark days because, hey, listen, we're all human. They come and they go. But that airplane analogy, that taxi, the sunlight, the paradoxical analogy, all of it was a beautiful gift. And it makes me think, my friend, awareness, man, I don't think she gets enough street cred. When you know better, you can do better. When you have that moment of, I don't want to live like this, that's a gift. That's a gift. My friend, our listeners that want to continue to connect with you, to hear your words, to hear you, to stay connected to your content, how can we do that? How can we stay connected with you and your beautiful wisdom out into the world?
Oh my goodness. You're going to make me blush. Um, so one of the things that I have done for my own mental health is to dramatically reduce my own social media footprint. So
Mm.
the the best place to find me and where I put my content out into the world is frankly on LinkedIn. And you've got my links, so feel free to drop it wherever your listeners, the beautiful listeners, that your beautiful community, that is the best place to find and follow me. And from there, I've actually got a couple of blogs. I will always keep my mental health blog up.
Mm.
That is not only, do I occasionally go back to it, I'm like, ooh, that was actually pretty good, girl, you did okay. But it's there's this wonderful analogy. There's a Peloton instructor, Christine Derclay, who reminds is as part of reminding the her riders, those of as she's a coach, she'll remind you that the reason you need to test your fitness every so often is because it's like Uber. If they don't know where you are, they can't come pick you up and take you to where you want to go. It's not simply enough to know where you want to go. You need to know where you are, because
Mm.
that's how you met. That. And so when I think about my blog, um, because I've had people ask me, that was some of the hardest, most difficult part. That was the lowest part of your life, and there's some very vulnerable things out there about you. Um, wouldn't you want to take that down? And the answer is no, because for me to know how far I've come, I have to know
Mm.
where I started. And I will go back and I read what 2019 2020 me wrote, and I think about where I am now, and the gift to myself is the gift of perspective of my
Mm.
own growth. And so it's there largely for me. Um, but it's also there for others who may benefit from being able to see what growth can look like,
Mm.
because it's messy, it's not linear. And I think that there's some things in there that can also help those people who may not be in the struggle, but who want to understand what people that they love and care about are going through. And one of the things that has been so gratifying to me about the blog, and again, you can find all of my links and everything from my LinkedIn page. But what is things that has been so gratifying to me about the blog is not just the people that I've heard from, and it's so much. I every week I hear from somebody
Mm.
who is either going through a mental health challenge themselves or cares about someone who is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's those people who care about the folks that are struggling. Those have been some of the most incredibly gratifying messages, because the the message that I've gotten from them is, I didn't understand what my daughter was going through,
Mm.
and I it didn't make sense to me. It seemed, I mean, in some cases, people would say it seemed made up, or it was so outside of my experience, I didn't think it could be real. And when they heard it from me, it helped them to better understand what was going on with the person that they cared about. And so if that's the kind of insight it can provide, I will leave it there. But yeah, I put a lot out, I put a lot out there over the years. But what I continue to care to write about, and share, is very much about um, mental health, but more so about leadership of ourselves,
Mm.
about cultivating our own leadership, largely leadership of self, our emotional
Yeah.
intelligence, um, and then just how we can human better.
I love
How can
that.
we be better humans?
I love that. My friends, all of that's going to be in the show notes. So please connect with our girl, Dr. Swaggart, on LinkedIn and check out those blog posts. My friend, thank you. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you for being real. Thank you for making your mess your message because it's a beautiful gift and helping so many more individuals than you even know. Thank you for the way you show up in the world. It's a pleasure to be in your orbit, my sister.
Well, thank you, and thank you for creating this space. Thank you for
Mm,
inviting me into it. Meg, thank you for sharing so much of yourself and just the way you put yourself out into the world is it's inspiring and it's remarkable.
mm,
And you have created and cultivated this community, this garden without walls, and
mm,
it's a remarkable thing. So I I am so happy to be in your orbit and to see you continue to rise and shine.
mm. Here's to being each other's hype women.